Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening is Rich Allen. With Avengers and Game of Thrones blowing our mind at the moment, it's only right that Ligue 1 should follow suit. But who slayed the Night King? Who has saved the world? But who didn't make it out alive? Maybe not so much on that, but plenty on the football at least after the latest headlines. On Friday night, Lyon got two winning ways again with a 3-2 victory over Bordeaux that didn't come without some adversity. The away side went 1-0 up through Memphis Depay, but Bordeaux were 2-1 up before Jovanovic saw red as it was 2-2, with a third goal coming in the last 10 minutes. On Sunday, as the games were moved for the Coupe de France final, the important game happened in Caen as they managed their second victory in a row over bitter rivals for the relegation places. Dijon, the 1-0 victory lifting them over their opponents and just 3 points off of Monaco, who have a game in hand this midweek. Another important result in the relegation fight is Nice's 3-0 victory over bottom side Guingamp. Youssef Attal's hat-trick ended the fight from the Britain side, who had a couple of chances in the game but remained rooted to the bottom and now 5 points away from that relegation playoff place with 4 games remaining. Lille got a very important 5-0 victory with 10 different people involved in the goals, 5 different assist makers, 5 different goal scorers, one of the best stats you'll see as they strengthen their grip on second place. While Saint-Etienne keep the pressure on Lyon and have a bit of a buffer for the for the Europa League spot with a 2-0 victory over Toulouse, thanks to a Robert Beric double. Elsewhere, Angers and Reims played a 1-1 draw, which at least omitted Reims' recent 4-game slide. Amiens and Strasbourg played an unentertaining 0-0 draw despite the interesting moment of a first female referee in Ligue 1. Unfortunately, our first game wasn't too eventful. And the final game on Sunday saw Olympique Marseille, unfortunately for them at least, fall back in that European race as they finished with a 2-1 defeat to Nantes, who are on some hot streak at the moment. And the important game of the weekend, some may say, on Saturday was the fact that Rennes stunned Paris Saint-Germain on penalties to win the Coupe de France final. It was the Brazilian pair of Neymar and Dani Alves who put the favourites in front before a Presnel Kimpembe own goal. And a Mexa header in the second half equalled the scores. Kylian Mbappe saw red for an awful challenge in the final seconds of extra time before perfect penalties meant that a knockout round was needed, with Christian Nkunku being the unlucky man to sail it over the bar and see Rennes win their first trophy since 1977. And that's all for now. But to keep up to date with all the news in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week, where else, especially with Rich in the hot seat, but that Coupe de France final. It was an excellent game, to and throw in, and exactly what we want from a cup final that has sometimes really been dominated by Paris Saint-Germain in recent years. But Rich, we sometimes focus a little bit too much on the losers, especially when they're a big favourite in these kind of games. But let's focus on your team, Rennes, first and have a bit of a gush and get it out of your system at least. Anyway, it must be an immense feeling. It's been a long time coming since they've last won a major trophy in French football, even though they've had a couple of good opportunities for it. But what a way to win. I mean, it's sometimes a little bit of a lottery and you're on the edge of your seat, but it's a massive result, not just for this season and silverware and the things that Stefan has done, but for next season as well. They've guaranteed European football now. It's a combination of a number of things, and what has been, in the end now at least, been an impressive season.
Yeah, exactly. I think amongst the Rennes fans, of which I'm fortunate to count myself as one, I think relief was probably the overriding emotion, closely followed by, sheer joy, of course. But as you say, Rennes have come so close so often recently. We go back 10 years and, they lost to Ligue 2 side Guingamp, or then Ligue 2 side Guingamp. in the Coupe de France final. They've lost another Coupe de France final back in 2014, also to Guingamp. They lost the Coupe de la Ligue final in 2013 to Saint-Etienne. So I think coming into this final was probably the first final where they were heavy underdogs. And I think to have gone down to two goals within the opening 20 minutes, two very good goals, I would add. I'm sure I wasn't alone watching that game, were fearing, this could be an embarrassment. We've seen, sort of embarrassingly one-sided finals recently when PSG have been involved because of their sheer dominance. So it was just fantastic to see the team not let that sort of early blow, as I say, 20 minutes down, 2-0 down, 20 minutes gone, 2-0 down, and PSG looking really dominant. It was really encouraging, I think, to see that Stefan and the Rennes team didn't let that sort of knock their confidence. They didn't crumble. They came back. They got the goal before half time. Stefan gave his team talk that many have now reported on about the fact that he could sense that there was something not quite with PSG in terms of their game, that Rennes could really capitalise on that. They came out. They got their equaliser. I think on the balance of play, 2-2 at full time felt a reasonably fair score. We obviously then went into extra time. We saw Mbappe's dreadful red card. I thought Rennes had done really well in that game in marking him, in keeping him away from the action. It never really felt as though, he hit the post, I think, with an effort in the second half. In the first half. But it never really felt he was in the game. And I think that frustration just built up, and bang, it just popped. And it was a dreadful challenge. Zero complaints. It's as red card worthy a foul as you could possibly see. That then, I think, was a defining moment. It really was. It gave Rennes that sort of belief. They were starting to look really tired then. Stefan really delayed making his substitutions. It was really deep into extra time before any changes were made. They were looking tired. So to see then PSG go down to 10 men, I think was just that confidence boost they needed. Just before then, it went to spot kicks. And, Rennes have had a couple of penalty shootouts already this season. They won one in an earlier round against Brest. They lost one then in the Coupe de la Ligue quarterfinals against Monaco, and the penalties in that were appalling. You watch the penalty shootout from Saturday night, every single one of Rennes' penalties were firmly struck, were confident. Areola never got close. There was a real confidence, I think, in Rennes' approach to that, and that really did pay off. Obviously then Christopher Nkunku, who'd only just come on 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes before the end of extra time, was unfortunately the guy that missed the penalty. And, everybody has seen, I think, around the world now, the celebrations at full time of Kubek running the length of the pitch, of Julien Stéphan and Olivier Letang embracing, falling to the ground, pumping the air, of Francois Henri Pinault, the owner and former owner of the Pinault family, the celebrations that they were doing. This is a long time coming for them. They've obviously put they're Breton people. They have put a lot of money into this club. They are passionate about the club. It was just a real joy, I think, to see. You could see the outpouring of emotion, and it was relief. It was joy. It was just so refreshing to see, so nice to see. The long running joke about Rennes, of course, is that this sort of loser club, the sort of bottlers of France, who have really sort of failed to reach their potential, and all of a sudden now they are a cup winner. They've got Europa League back next season when it didn't really look like it was going to be on. They obviously did really well in the Europa League this season, but possibly due to the strength of the squad, I think it's had an effect on their league placing, and I don't think many Rennes fans thought that Europa League was really going to be an option, especially with PSG being the opposition in the final. So as we've got that back, all of a sudden, Rennes are in the spotlight, players are in the spotlight. It's been reported today that Francois Pinault is going to be looking at putting 60 to 80 million into the club in terms of a transfer budget. In addition to the fact that, there may very well be departures. Ismail Assar, Rennes are supposedly willing to listen to offers for him. So, there's potentially 30, 40 million coming in for him. And they are a team now. They made themselves quite well known on the wider stage with their Europa League performances this season. Beating PSG in the final will only add to that. And all of a sudden, they are perhaps a viable option for a bigger name player. So you don't want to get ahead of yourself too much, but it does have that feeling. And it sort of feels as though we've been here sort of before, although not backed by a cup win. But there is a feeling as though this really could be finally the start of something, because they have the financial backing, they have the facilities, they have the stadium, they have everything in their capability to really build something now. So hopefully this is just that sort of tip over the edge that they needed to make them really believe in themselves throughout. So it's potentially the start of a really exciting time for Rennes.
Yeah, and that's quite the funny thing, really, Rich, when you think back to it, because you mentioned a lot of things that put Rennes ahead, what you would think of a lot of Ligue 1 clubs at least. But the one deciding factor over the last 3, 4, 5 years, I'm thinking back all the way to Philippe Montagnier, maybe even before that, is manager. And that's the real difference that Julien Stéphan has been doing. I know we've mentioned before how many clubs were sniffing at him. We know that Thierry Henry wanted him as his assistant at Monaco before he was promoted when Lamouchi was getting rid of earlier this season. And he's been terrific. He really has. But it's also encapsulates how important sometimes one game can be. I mean, I remember myself and Jez talking about on Thursday's show that this game was as important to Rennes and their season as it was to Paris Saint-Germain, really, because despite what they had done in the Europa League, which was terrific, and they were a little bit unlucky to face an Arsenal side that are really good at home, at least in the Europa League, at least. And the fact that they'd had a turnaround, at least anyway, in terms of quality and players improving. But if they'd have lost this cup final, there would be no European football next season to build on that success from the Europa League that we've had this season. They would have been potentially, not just at the moment, if they stayed where they are, that's 11th place finish, which isn't great. But there's no argument that teams below them like Nantes, who were on fire, and Angers, who keep picking up points, that they could have finished 13th, 14th even, which would have seemed like a real disappointment given how positive the sort of it looked around February time. But this changes everything, doesn't it? A bit of silverware in the cabinet. I mean, I'm sure every single one of the players will be delighted to have a medal and get European football under their belt again, which would be a terrific experience for them, given how they've got a little bit of confidence there. And it really transforms the season. But no, credit to everyone at the club. Credit to Stefan, who is certainly building something. I mean, you can see the improvements in the players like Mbaye Nyong, who's always been sort of a peripheral figure, no matter where he's been, whether it be in France or in Italy, sort of never quite clicked at the moment he wanted to, but he looks much better recently at Rennes. And he's gotten a tune out of someone I want to quickly talk about before we go on to Paris Saint-Germain, and that's Hatem Ben Arfa, who certainly enjoyed himself after the full-time whistle, really, with reporters. And we mentioned it was his revenge game, and I'd forgotten about that. And I did back Rennes to win. I think I said on that extra time, though, so don't quote me on that bit at least. But I knew it was the Hatem Ben Arfa thing that changed my mind. But his comments at full time are a mix of both, aren't they, Rich? It's definitely something he obviously feels passionate about, and he's never one to shut his mouth or keep his thoughts to himself. He never has been, Hatem Ben Arfa, but he showed his emotion at the same time. He was very proud to have won, but also to get one over Nasser El Khelaifi as well.
Well, I think I think a lot of people had obviously seen his sort of revitalization of his career with Nice. He'd got that big move to PSG, which, he always would have wanted. That's the kind of person that he is. He wants to play at the top level for the very best. You can't fault him for wanting that. It obviously didn't work out in quite spectacular fashion at PSG. So, I don't want to do my own team a disservice here, but to have sort of had to walk away from that and join, perhaps in his mind and to people looking from the outside, a slightly lesser team than PSG in terms of name, I suppose. I can see it probably might have very well knocked his His ego, which we know is obviously a big thing and a big factor for how he plays and his personality. So this was a big game. This was, potentially this is his final game for Ren. There's rumours that he's looking for a move to Spain, which is something that he's wanted for a while in the summer. So this was sort of his final big game for Ren, and perhaps a chance to remind people, PSG made a big mistake in not playing me. There's speculation is that Ben Arfa himself didn't really help himself during his time in Paris, but whatever happened there. But this was a chance for him to show, PSG made a mistake. I am, a good player, and by and large, I don't think it was his very best game for Rennes, but he has shown in the big games he has that ability to control things. He has that ability to take charge. He's got a level of maturity that I think people often forget. We saw that. You go back to the Europa League game in Seville against Betis. I thought the way that he played in that game was a completely different Ben Arfa than many would have seen. He was calm, he was mature, he took charge of the game. There was nothing silly. He played the simple stuff, but he really did sort of dominate that game in a non-flashy way. And yeah, there was flashy moments in the final on Saturday, but I felt again there was that sort of mature side, and I think maybe the outpouring of emotion that we saw at the end of that very, very un-Ben Arfa-esque. But then, of course, we then heard very Ben Arfa-esque with his comments about getting revenge on PSG, and I think he was coming out and saying that he's got nothing against the club. It's just the people that run it. That they were looking at some kind of remontada, but PSG were familiar with those, and he was not shy in really getting the boot in. And I think many people would perhaps get rubbed the wrong way by that. I think many people can also find a little bit of humour in that, and that is Ben Arfa. He is the archetypal Marmite player. You either love him or you hate him. And if this one season is all we see of him in a Rennes shirt, then it's certainly been a season to savour, because it's been a hugely successful season. I don't think we've necessarily seen him at his Nice best, but there have been glimpses. There have been goals. There have been moments, and he can walk away as a Coupe de France winner. So, it's Ben Arfa in a nutshell, really, in so much as 1 minute he's not in the headlines, and very quickly he can decide that I want to be part of the headlines, and so goes about making the comments that he made after the game.
Yeah, and we all like a little bit of a spice to our superhero sometimes, don't we? We like someone he's got a bit of a grit to the glamour, shall we say, a bit about him. He always has had that sort of spiky edge, and I'm sure he feels justified in the fact that, in all honesty, he was never really given a chance by PSG. And I know that some may point to the fact that he has sometimes got a bit of an attitude problem, and you might also point to the fact that it's an incredibly talented squad, and there's only certain places for a certain amount of players. But at the same time, there just never seemed to be any sort of opportunity for him to play. He played maybe about 6 or 7 games into the start of the season when he started there, and then never really got a look in afterwards. And it took a sort of crazy Instagram story to try and pull away from things. And I'm sure he's happy to just have that moment where now we can put it in the very back of his mind. He's already thrown that thing under the bus now. It's out of his mind, and we can all get on with our lives, which is what we would like to do. But on to Paris Saint-Germain, and I'll quickly talk about the game before we talk about some very big talking points, especially involving a couple of their players. And starting off with the game, really, they did what Paris Saint-Germain have been like for the last couple of weeks, really, didn't they, Rich? It was a moment where they got themselves ahead. They were pretty comfortable in the first 45 minutes. They had a lot of good chances. They didn't put enough of them away, despite the goals from Dani Alves and Neymar. And then it slowly seeps away. I think the Niang chances sort of put the the cat amongst the pigeons to say that it sort of shocked the defence a little bit, and that's what causes the terrible own goal from Kimpembe, who's had a pretty dreadful season. I'm pretty sure he's just waiting for the final whistle on the final day to go so he can go on his jollies and maybe get the season out of his head, really, to be fair. And then once the goal from Mexico goes in, the panic starts going in. They're a bit rash. They do this sort of thing that I always think of it as almost the old Italian way. You would see it in the Champions League when a Juventus or an AC Milan back in the day were getting beaten or not results going their way, and they would start flicking out. They would start doing the silly moments, and there was a couple, especially Kylian Mbappe's foul, which I don't know why he's trying to gestate to the referee that he's not really done anything, because it's a truly dreadful tackle, and a sign that he's maybe not quite as mature as we think he is, at least on the pitch yet, of keeping us cool when they absolutely would have loved him to take a penalty. I'm sure you would take anyone who scored 30 goals to take your penalty. He's got a good chance from the 6-yard box, especially when your sixth scorer has missed it and then ended up costing you the final. Unfortunately, that falls on Kunku's shoulders, but I'm sure he'll recover from that. But the one I wanted to talk about mainly, Rich, is Neymar, because there's two incidents, sort of, you would say, after the fact. He had a decent game, but first of all, when he's collecting his runners up ladder, when he's going up the stairs, he seems to throw a punch at a spectator who had been admittedly chastising other players, so he's not completely guilt-free. It was not just an innocent bystander. We do have to caveat that, but also afterwards, him going after his own teammates, saying that the younger players need to basically, not verbatim, but shut up and listen to the experienced players on that squad. And Tuchel understood it, sort of the moment he's coming from. And there's reports that there is that kind of bit, and Tuchel can't quite understand what's happened to the squad in the last couple of weeks and why they've sort of shut down and thought the season is over. A lot of Neymar sort of hinted at a lot of the young players, seeming like they're like I mentioned earlier, already on their jollies, ready to be fair. But Rich, on sort of both incidents, the first one is pretty ugly. We don't want to see it, but it's will be probably resulting in a ban which is petulant from Neymar, and he should know better. But also his comments on the younger players just show that maybe there is something deep rooted that Veronica Rabiot has been mentioning recently. There's a sort of deep rooted poison within the dressing room at Paris Saint-Germain that sort of stilted them this season.
Well, on the incident with the spectator, it's a difficult one to call, isn't it? You know, obviously, you can't believe you have to say it, but obviously, players can't strike, supporters, fans, spectators, whatever you want to call them. They can't do that. It's an obvious thing to say. Yes, there was goading. Yes, that individual was saying some, not particularly pleasant things, accusing Verratti of being racist and Buffon, I think, not good enough and things like this. So it's obviously not nice things. So you can see why Neymar would have been a bit annoyed. He's having this camera phone shoved in his face. He's going up to collect a loser's medal. That's obviously not something that he's got too much experience of. He's just come back from injury. So, you can see why he'd be, a bit frustrated. You can't lash out. There's no defending that. There was no physical violence on the part of the spectator. It was just sheer frustration on Neymar's part. So, you can see why he was frustrated, but you can't obviously condone the manner in which he lashed out. So, a ban will come, I'm sure of it. I think on the whole, yes, it's deserved. We don't want to be sending a message out where incidents like that can happen. But, there's an element of you can understand the frustration that he'd got. So I think on that incident, yes, Neymar is in the wrong. But, prior to that, you can see why he would have been, very, very, cross, angry, upset. About his comments then about the younger players, I can see where he's coming from, but I do feel that it's a little bit rich. He's had an injury, which again has kept him out for, the business end of the season when PSG really needed him. Yes, okay, the injury is, you can't pin that on Neymar, but there's video and pictures of him sort of swanning around, sort of a law unto himself, really, at PSG, back to Brazil. He can sort of go where he wants, when he wants. I have seen question marks raised as could he have come back sooner from the injury? No one here can tell that. That's pure speculation. Only Neymar and the PSG medical team would be able to tell you that. But yeah, it just strikes me as a little bit rich. You look at when the chips have been down for PSG this season. It's not really the young players that have let them down. Yeah, let's go back to the Man United Champions League game. Yes, Kimpembe conceded that penalty, but I think we've all agreed now it was hugely unfortunate. I think even the most seasoned of professionals would have jumped exactly as Kimpembe did, would have done exactly the same as Kimpembe did. He was just victim of an unfortunate, sort of issue that we've got with VAR and handballs that have, that's not the only incident and an example of that. We've seen it numerous times where the slowing down of replays to highlight handballs show them off as far worse than they actually are. But let's also remember that Buffon, probably the most experienced player in that team, committed a far bigger error, I feel, in allowing Man United to score one of their early goals. There were other senior players that I think really let PSG down. Look at the penalty shootout. Where was Marquinhos? In that penalty shootout. Why was it Christopher Nkunku? 21, I think he is, had only just come on. Why is it him that's left to take that penalty? It's a little bit. It doesn't sit well with me to go after the young players. When the likes of Draxler have not been at their best this season. Juan Bernat, I think, was at fault really for the Rennes Kimpembe in goal in the final on Saturday. There have been times where Dani Alves has been appalling. There's been times when Verratti's let them down. The senior players have hardly shown themselves to be the guiding light that the young players need to follow. I actually think that one of PSG's best players on Saturday night was Colin Dagba. And you can probably count on one hand the number of games he started this season. Very young, very raw, but I thought he played really, really well in the final. Areola, Buffon's junior, if you like, but has been by far and away the better of the two goalkeepers at PSG. Kimpembe, and whether Neymar's comments were directly intended for Kimpembe and Kimpembe only Neymar will know, but Kimpembe has had a stinker of a season. He has had a really, really poor season. So whether it was aimed specifically at him, because there have been other PSG players, bear in mind they're not a team well known for playing a lot of youngsters. Tuchel gave Nsocki his chance, has given Moussa Diaby his chance. And I think by and large, they've been all right. You can't be expecting too much from them. Not when you've got, multi-million pound players on the pitch. Why is the onus on the young players to be the ones to get them out of the hole? They had, Leandro Paredes, who I think has been a pretty to borderline very poor signing for 47 million, something like that. He has been pretty shocking, I think, since he joined PSG. So it doesn't sit well with me. To me, the likes of Dagba, the likes of Diaby, the likes of Nkunku, the likes of Nsocki haven't played enough for me to feel as though perhaps those comments are aimed at them. I can only assume he's aiming those comments at Kimpembe because, he got an unfortunate own goal on Saturday night. He obviously conceded that penalty against Manchester United. So in individual games, PSG's singular games, they are perhaps the two biggest of the season so far. And there have been errors from Kimpembe, arguably in both. So I can only assume that he's going after Kimpembe there. It's never good to see a player criticise teammates in public like that. I don't like to see it, regardless of whether there's names involved or not. I really don't like to see it. It's the job, I think, of the captain to come out and criticise the team as a whole. It's the job of the coach to come out and criticise the team as a whole if they've played badly. It's not the job of random players in the team to say, you know what, it's the youngsters that have let us down. They need to listen to us senior players. Because if I'm perfectly honest, I'm not impressed with that. I've not been impressed for large parts of Neymar's time with PSG. There have been hugely impressive moments, of course, but I think the attitude that Neymar has in that squad, that sort of, he feels like there's a divine right to do whatever he wants. It really, really doesn't sit well with me. And, you can only speculate, you can only second guess. It's no coincidence that Mbappe has been in this spectacular run of form of late. Neymar came back, started his first game since his return from injury on Saturday, and that, regardless of the red card, was one of Mbappe's poorest games in a long, long time. And you just wonder, you could see that in the way that PSG were playing. Everything was being funneled through Neymar. And all of a sudden, Mbappe was, I don't want to say a bit part player, but he was having to sort of scrap for things that he hasn't had to be. And it was just another example. We thought we perhaps seen the end of it at the start of the season prior to Neymar's injury, but it goes back to when Neymar and Mbappe first joined. And there were many that felt, could the two of them really work together in the one team? And I think the way that Mbappe has progressed, especially without Neymar being there, has highlighted, Mbappe is every bit as good, if not in certain parts better, than Neymar. And with the attitude that Neymar has, and obviously with a strong Brazilian presence in that squad, everything was funneled through him on Saturday. And I think that was to the detriment of PSG's performance, if I'm perfectly honest. They need to, unless one of those two are going to go, PSG need to remember that what we saw at the start of the season and how well those two can play together when they're performing and functioning as a team. Because on Saturday night, it felt way too much like it was, the Neymar show. Mbappe wanted it to be his show, and you can't have that. If you're going to be a success, no matter what the game, you can't have that. So I think it really did raise some question marks about how Tuchel regains getting the best out of those two when they're playing together, because it didn't really work for me on Saturday night.
No, you make an excellent point there, Rich, about sort of Neymar's attitude and the people he's aiming at. Because, like you say, Kimpembe's maybe Thilo Kehrer maybe in that category as well, given that he's maybe a more senior version of these young players. Because I think if he's aiming in them at Diaby and Nkunku and Soki and Dagba, they're players that are looking to leave, really, and there's a reason why their eyes are against the door. It's because players like him and his friends are keeping them out of the squad, really, in all honesty. And in all honesty, you have to look more insinuant in these kind of moments. What could he have done that would have improved his team's chances of winning? What could he have done? Maybe not fly to Brazil a little bit too often, maybe try and come back a little bit quicker if he wasn't so injured all the time. Really, it's there are question marks about it when you do make those statements if you aren't really the captain, because like I say, he is very much protected at Paris Saint-Germain at the moment, and there's a number of players. It's funny because we say that they don't really have any depth and they're desperate for players in the summer, but half of this squad wants to go because they're not playing enough football, really. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do this summer, because it's going to be a big one for them. Most importantly, they need to put the trust in Tuchel to do the job for them. I think if there's any sort of lasting doubts of whether Angelo Henrique should be continuing as director of football, it should be dismissed by that Paredes signing. I mean, his last two signings have been Paredes and Kehrer, and I can't think of a worse combo in Europe, to be fair, this season of signings, because both have been pretty awful, really, and pretty non-existent. I mean, Kehrer has made a couple of really big, high-profile mistakes, and I don't think I've seen Paredes play for Paris Saint-Germain yet. I don't know if anyone else has yet, but they can let me know when they do, because I don't think I've seen him touch the ball really for them, which is a pretty indictment of what he's been playing. And yeah, they need a rethink of the summer, and hopefully they can do something in the last couple of games at least to salvage a little bit of pride, but it will be ending as a pretty disappointing season I'm sure PSG fans will be hoping that Tuchel can take the reins, grab this team by the throat next season in the summer and make something really happen, because that's exactly the kind of leadership they need at this point in time. But on to matters in Ligue 1, because one of the more interesting storylines that comes out of the Coupe de France final is, like we've mentioned, Rich, that means that Rennes will be heading to the Europa League next season, which means that fifth place is no longer a Europa League place in France, which cuts a lot of teams off, really, and that includes someone who lost on Sunday night, and that's Marseille. They're now 5 points behind Saint-Etienne with 4 games to go, and it's not what they want to hear when A, they have Lyon coming up in a couple of weeks' time, and they also B, know that Saint-Etienne are on a pretty tremendous run, despite the fact that they've maybe got some, should we say, sticky fixtures to come. I'm looking at Monaco away, depending on the result they get midweek against their already jubilant Rennes, who don't really care about the league anymore. It might matter a little bit less. Montpellier, Nice, and Angers, 3 teams that you'd never really quite know what you're getting. So it could be feasible that Saint-Etienne win out, but a pretty dreadful result again for Marseille, just when we were mentioning that they were picking up a little bit of form, at least anyway, if not performance-wise. But they were kind of maybe in a case a little bit lucky that Nantes hadn't took the lead earlier, hadn't won by a couple more goals. They may argue that they had a couple of chances late on, but again, this whole Marseille team, especially if the real talking point isn't just what they'll do in the summer now. It's that if they're missing out on European football completely, that changes the projection and what they can do even in the transfer market completely, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. I mean, if Sunday night's game showed us anything, it's just how rotten that Marseille squad is. There's a lot of good players there who are no longer good players, but are on an awful lot of money. And I aim that squarely at Payet, and I aim that squarely at Mandanda. They were high-profile players who were brought back from, let's say, mixed spells in England. Obviously, Payet's far more successful than Mandanda's. Were brought back, and yes, we saw 5 months of excellent football from Payet to help Marseille get to the Europa League final. And that's been about it, I think, as far as his spell goes. It's been an absolutely woeful season from him. I think wrongly he's been given the captain's armband. Attitude wasn't right from the start. The way he sulked, the way he's been absolutely anonymous. I mean, we're not exaggerating. I hate to. You could almost literally say he was anonymous in large parts of games. He was brought off early again on Sunday evening to huge boos from the Velodrome. They've clearly had enough from him. His heart's not in it anymore. He's clearly thinking, "Yep, I've got my big move." It seems as though it's probably going to be China. So money is the factor for him. He's just not been good, and it's been an attitude that has really, I think, infected a large part of that team. Thauvin. Start of the season, again, it was a case of it was him. If he wasn't scoring, Marseille weren't winning. It felt like, and the pressure maybe of another season of that has got to Thauvin a little bit, because his form has really tailed off, and really it's only been the January signing of Balotelli that I think has just sort of given them that tiny little bit of a fresh boost. That I think allied with the complete lack of consistency from teams above them, that really brought Marseille back into the Europa League and potentially Champions League discussion, because certainly it was not by any means down to the performance of Marseille. Because even when they were winning, and I feel they brought like a broken record, but even when they were winning, they weren't playing particularly well. They had the rub of the green. They were coming up against teams who were having an off day themselves. But it's been pretty rare this season where Marseille have completely dominated teams off the park. From minute 1 to minute 90, there haven't been too many games of that. And the top teams have those kind of games. Lille have done it countless times this season. Lyon have done it, a number of times this season. Saint-Etienne are currently doing it at the moment. PSG, they're PSG. Marseille are just doing that too few and far between. So it's been a real red flag, I think, to Garcia or whoever is in charge. If Garcia decides to walk away, or they decide that Garcia's time is done, that squad needs a massive overhaul, because from front to back there are glaring holes in that squad. You look at the defense. I think they've struck a little bit lucky in that Kaletakar and Kamara have at least forged something resembling a semi-decent centre-back pairing. They're still not rock solid. Kamara still does show off the fact that, and it's not to his not to the detriment of him, but centre-back is not his first choice position. He's obviously very young still. Kaletakar is new to the league. It's a partnership that potentially shouldn't work, but it just about does its job. They're still having to persist with Bunasara at right back. I don't necessarily think that's it's sort of square peg round hole. Amavi has been, again, very, very hit and miss, but more often a miss at left back. So there's big problems in defence. Mandanda, I think, has had one of his worst seasons for Marseille, and that's another position that they simply have to look at replacing in the summer. In midfield, again, I think big overhaul is needed. They had a big outlay on Strootman, I think, has been a disappointment. You could argue that Sanson has just about been perhaps their best midfielder. Consistency is still a big concern for me of his. Gustavo has spent too much time on the bench this season. Going forward, obviously, Payet, I mentioned how disappointing he's been. Tovan has started well, but the sort of struggles and pressure of being the only source of creativity in that team maybe got the best of him. Balotelli has obviously got the goals since he came in January. Campos, you never know what you're going to get with him. On his day, he is a fantastic player, but his day just doesn't seem to come often enough. He was, again, I don't think he had a particularly good game last night, but produced a moment of magic with that cross for Balotelli's goal. So there's a number of positions that need for, and we've spoken about this before. This is nothing new. This should not be a shock to those in charge at Marseille. Because if they'd have actually looked to have addressed this or started to address this, probably 2 seasons ago when issues in the squad were started to become clear, they wouldn't be in this mess now. Now they're coming into a transfer window when I would say they probably need 7, 8, 9, maybe even 10 quality players to flesh out that squad. Because it's not good enough, I don't think, to have the likes of, what's your options coming off the bench for attacking? Well, it's Clinton and G. And I've got nothing particularly against Clinton and G, but if you're going for Champions League football, which is what Marseille should be going for, you need better options off the bench. You need better options in defence than Adil Rami. He needs to be moved on. You need better options, in midfield than an aging Gustavo, who was, yes, he's come to life a little bit in the last couple of games, but has not been the same player. You need more than too much money spent on someone like Strootman. There's almost too much, I think, that needs to be done, that this can now be solved in one transfer window. You feel as though they're actually, they're going to have to do as good a job as they can in the summer and then go again in the transfer window come January next year, because they've left it too late. And all of a sudden now it's looking quite likely that this team won't have European football. Now, why, with European football, going to Marseille makes some sense. It's obviously a club that's got a lot of history. It's a club that have got a huge fan base, fantastic stadium. Marseille itself as a city is fantastic, brilliant position in France. All of that makes sense with European football. Without it, and with the team in a position that they're in now, where it's clear there are players there now that don't want to be there. It's clear there are players there that are nowhere near the quality that Marseille need. Why would you go to Marseille? It doesn't make much sense. So they need European football. They need the pulling power of, even if it is just the Europa League, they need that pulling power. Because if they don't, I fear where next season can go for them.
Yeah, it's interesting because then, like you say, the worry now is, it has been mentioned in a few places, players they really probably want to keep at least anyway, not just because they're through their system and the likes, but or younger players, but players you could build around. I know they've floated out Sanson, but even Lopez is taking interest, and surely you try and keep one of them really coming in the summer. But it depends on if you can keep players that are going to be ambitious like that, and whether this or the Champions project sort of thing is sort of dead in the water. But the important thing is trying to get some new blood and bits in, because I think the thing they forget about sometimes is, like we've mentioned before a few times, is the pull they have in France. I mean, it's such a well-supported club, and every single player in France, and especially of a French heritage, knows the history and the excellent players that have been through, the fantastic support they have. I mean, they have to look more inwards. They have to stop being so continentally focused of thinking, right, we need the best players from all over. The fight from within. I mean, the fact that they didn't think of putting in a big offer for Issa Diop last summer when he went to West Ham and the like, why they didn't try and fight some of these players that go to Sevilla like Longley and Yoris Gnagnon. It just seems strange that they've never tried to throw their hat into some of these ones. Why aren't they? And now, even, why isn't there speculation that they may be looking at Yusuf Attal to come in at left back, and who had a fantastic season? Why aren't they in for maybe a Remy Udan at Rennes, or looking at some of the impressive players that have been in other clubs in the last couple of years? It just strikes me that they're thinking too big picture. And also, coming back to sort of the game on Sunday, I don't think I've seen so many individual defensive mistakes in a game for a long while. I counted about 4 or 5 really that led to really clear-cut chances for Nantes, where they could have really ran up the score. I mean, 2 of them clearly led to goals, but it's been a symptom of their entire season. And the funny thing is it was Marvi a lot of the time, and he wasn't present on Sunday, and it kept happening still. It was Bounassar, it was Kamara having a little bit of a brain fart, you might say, and it's just disappointing to see that they're still stuck in sort of first gear, and it's a shame for them, at least anyway, that they look likely, at least anyway, of missing out unless things happen rapidly. But very quickly before we move on, we'll give credit to Nantes. They've been excellent in the last couple of weeks. Thank you for Le Canary for making me eat my words, because I was saying how disappointed I was this season, and how they admittedly they had a good reason for it with the Emiliano Sala situation, but they had been pretty dull and uninteresting. But they've had a terrific couple of games, and they've been really great to watch at the same time. So credit to them, and hopefully they can use that as a platform for next season and be a much stronger side, fighting back in the sort of top half of the table instead. But very quickly onto the relegation battle, really, Rich, because it's taking more twists than a game of bop it at the moment. Really, to be fair, we seem to have a grip on it, and then it changes the next week, because last week we thought, because of Dijon's big win, even though Caen beat Nantes, beat Nice, that it was really the mustard side's thing to lose, and lose they have, because Caen get another nice win. Probably for the first time, it's the first time that Caen weren't really dominated and nicked 1-0, although they might give the keys to the city to Brice Monday if they do manage to survive. But a fantastic win for them, exactly when they need it yet again, and leads into another game next weekend, where if they win, not only could they be a real distance apart from the bottom 2 and automatic relegation, but they could even pull in the sides above them, given how they've played recently.
Yeah, it was a huge game. Momentum at this time of the season is massive. And we know from the past 2-3 seasons, can't have that experience at this time of the season to know how and when to pull in a performance. We've seen them get unlikely draws in the last 2 seasons. Their final game, or close to their final game, has been against PSG, and they managed to come away despite playing horrifically for all season. They always just seem to just about scrape it and just about do enough. And it was the same story again against Dijon. It was a really tight game. Whoever silly thing to say, I know, but whoever came out of that game with 3 points, if there indeed was going to be a winner, just continues that momentum. Dijon have had a couple of good results of late. They obviously won away at Lyon. They beat Rennes, and they came into this game with confidence. You had Caen off the back of a 1-0 away at a 1-0 win away at Nice. That obviously a couple of weeks prior to that got the win away at Monaco as well. There was confidence in reason for both, I think, to have an element of confidence coming into this. So whoever came away with the win from this game, it was vital. It was hugely important, and for Caen to have got it, with the run in that Caen have got, it's not. It's not necessarily the nicest of runs in, but they have now sort of destiny, if you like, in their own hands. They're away at Guingamp at the weekend, which is another massive, massive game. If they win that, I think they have license to feel, a little bit like, what, safety really is almost there. Dijon don't have a particularly nice run in themselves, so I think for Caen to come away from next week's game with 3 points as well, all of a sudden that's 3 wins on the bounce, with 3 games of which arguably one is tricky, which is away at Lyon. They've got Reims at home, who probably by then I wouldn't imagine would have much to play for. Bordeaux they finish with at home. Again, don't imagine they'd have particularly too much to play for at that point in time. They're winnable games as far as Caen go. So I think there's a real feeling now in Caen. Look, we've done this before. We know what's needed. We've got the win. We've got that big win over Dijon. Destiny, as I say, is in their own hands.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that even if Caen win at the weekend, it's maybe not over, because Dijon play Nantes, who, like I say, have been terrific recently. But just when you're on a 4-game winning streak, it feels like a team like Dijon might beat you. And they've got Strasbourg, Paris Saint-Germain, who folded really, if anything, really, and Toulouse, who can be a give me on a certain day, on a last day of the season they won't be. So I don't think it's completely over yet, which is absolutely crazy. I'm not going to call who's going to stay up now. I think we've done it enough times to be proven wrong. We'll wait until someone mathematically is over, and that includes Guingamp, at least for now, because their weekend game now, Rich, goes absolutely massive. I mean, we mentioned on Thursday's show that Nice, it depends on which Nice turns up to whether Guingamp really stood a chance. And unfortunately, it was the Attal show. He was absolutely terrific in the 3 goals he scored. But that means that they're now 5 points adrift of Caen. And that means that this game of the weekend, much like the opposite situation from Caen and Dijon last weekend, means that if Caen beat Guingamp, they'll be 8 points ahead of them with only 9 remaining, which pretty much confirms their relegation. So it's all guns at the hill. They need to win at Caen next weekend, and that they'll be disappointed that they're coming out without the greatest of form after that cup final, and it's going to be a tall order even against a Caen side they'll feel like they can get points against.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing you can say for Guingamp is, of the 3, they've certainly got the easier of the run-ins. They've got Caen at home, away at Rennes, home to Nîmes, away at Amiens. So, if you were going to choose a run-in for a team, that's not a million miles off what you would probably choose. Nîmes and Amiens are safe, have achieved what they wanted to achieve. Nîmes have probably overachieved. Rennes, as you said before, if they can win their remaining games, wouldn't it be great to finish as high as possible? But they're going to be living off the Coupe de France win for the rest of the season. They know they've got the Europa League football, so their eyes might not be fully on it. As a running goes, it's a nice run-in, I think, for Guingamp. So they have to retain that belief. Sadly, I think they also have to retain that belief of, you know what, they're going to have to probably win every single game. To not only make up that gap, but to put that distance then to take them out of those bottom two places. I'm not sure they're going to do it. I really am not. I'm like you. I don't want to call who's going down, but I think with the points that Guingamp now need to make up, is it 5 points they have to make up? I think now to get to 18th place. I'm just not sure they're going to do it. I think the defeats that they have suffered recently, I think, has just knocked the confidence out of them. And I think it's probably they've left a little bit too much to do, I think, with the resources that they have available. So it's unfortunate that if they do go down, because we know what a sort of romantic story Guingamp are in terms of their size and how long they've held on in Ligue 1. But if I was to make only one prediction with regards to relegation, it's just that I just feel that there's too much, I think, for Guingamp to do now in the remaining games.
Yeah, it is going to be tough, but I can always see a sequence of results like Monaco losing against Rennes in midweek, and then Guingamp beating Caen, and Dijon getting a point against Nantes, and Monaco failing against Saint-Etienne, leaving them on 32, Caen on 29, Dijon on 29, and Guingamp on 28. And then here we go again. It's all still well to play for with 3 games to go, with teams not just having a chance at getting a relegation playoff, but even maybe pulling Monaco back into it, or even Amiens back into it if anyone, like I say, if Caen wins, they go level with Monaco should they not gain any points in that game in hand, or a point off Amiens at least anyway. So it could really be a crazy end to the season, no matter how it sort of shakes out. At the moment, for some sides, it could really still build up and be massive. But it's been a great Ligue 1 weekend, which is why I think our Ligue 1 snapshots that we'll finish on, Rich, is going to be pretty excellent. There's a lot to choose from, but what do you think your Ligue 1 snapshot is this week?
It is tough. I think there have been some spectacular goals this weekend. I think you can go back to Jonathan Bamba's header. I don't think you'll find a better header than the header he put in Lille's 5-0 win. I think you could probably go back, certainly in terms of importance, to Faisal Faja's goal for Caen against Dijon.
I'm going that's a cross, by the way.
It is a cross. It is a cross. I don't think there's any doubt about it. But in terms of lucky strikes, you probably won't get many luckier ones this season, in terms of obviously it being a goal and it wasn't perhaps intended, but also the timing of it in particular, how important that game was. But I think we've got to really, this week, it's got to be Youssef Attal. And I think his performance in netting a hat-trick in Nice's 3-0 win over Guingamp. I think as far as hat-tricks go, it's a fantastic one. It's not the perfect hat-trick in how we all understand perfect hat-trick to mean, but this first goal, fantastic left foot volley from a long ball to the far post, right across goal. Fantastic finish. Bear in mind, he is a right back, although he is playing slightly further forward. And at some points during that game, he was actually playing probably left wing. I think it's probably how you'd best describe his position. Fantastic finish. His second goal, picked up the ball just inside the Guingamp half. Got a little bit lucky with a bit of a bobble. Got past a couple of players, but then sprinted through. Absolutely pierced that Guingamp midfield, pierced that Guingamp defence, and just about got a touch. It was a sort of 30, 35-yard run. Fantastic finish. And then his hat-trick goal was just a classic poacher's goal. Far post cross, and he's ghosted in at the back post to tap in. A real fantastic performance. He's had a stellar season already. This will only put his name in the shop window more, even though Nice have supposedly come out and said, look, St. Maximin, you can take him. Attal, no, he's staying. And it's interesting. I'm actually just reading the Telegraph reporting that Chelsea are potentially interested in signing him and rating him at £35 million. Well, I think if Chelsea put in an offer of that, I think the Nice owners would find that very hard to turn down, because I think certainly he has been one of the stars of the season, and certainly one of the signings of the season. Bear in mind, Nice only picked him up back in July for barely pennies, really, for compared to what he's going to go for. So it was a real statement performance, I think, from Atal, who will surely be subject to some big bids this summer.
Yeah, it's going to be hard for them to keep him, I think. But I think that, like you say, that warning of not being able to sell him is not just because they'd like to keep him, but also to drive the price up a bit. But I think you make a great point. Nice, if they can keep him, could build something interesting around him, especially with some money. Like you say, there's a lot of points. I've already mentioned Nantes, who are en fuego at the moment, 4 wins on the trot. And I mean, I think if you would have told them before this run that you'd beat a Le Canary fan, that you'd beat Lyon, you'd beat Paris Saint-Germain, you'd beat Amiens, and you'd beat Marseille, they would have laughed in your face, really. And they've really shone in the last couple of weeks after what has been a relatively poor second half of the season. But I think we have to talk about the 5-0 drubbing for Lille against Nîmes, because it was an excellent second half performance by the team that are going to be in the Champions League next season. There's a lot of superlative to say about this team this season. Lido have been absolutely excellent, but I think the stat I mentioned in the run up then, that there was 5 different goal scorers and 5 completely different assist makers in that 5-0 victory is exemplary. I don't think I've ever seen a game quite like it. It's very much symbolic of what Lille have made this season. They aren't a team of individuals, despite the excellence of Pepe and Theo Mendes and Rafael Leao and the fact that I'm naming more than one player there should point out the obvious, that this is a real team, and Galtier has made a great team of it, and terrific for them to see what they're doing, and also nice to see Robert Beric getting a brace after what has been a difficult year or so at Saint-Etienne, and him not quite being the striker we thought he might be when he first came, and when he had a good little run. And great to see him get a brace and be a part of a Le Vert team that's going to really be interesting if they go to Europe and can keep Gasset as well interested in the club as well. That's all that we have for this week. My thanks to Rich and all of you listening at home. Join us for the preview show, which will be back on Thursday, and the main show will be back at the same time, same place next week. A bientôt and goodbye.